I remember one day I was watching an episode of EastEnders and the character of Roxy was running along a train platform and you could see her radio mic pack on the back, and I was so excited.
Right, quiet on the set.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Roll call. Hi, and welcome to the Roll Call podcast, where every 2 weeks we invite a different guest from distinct professions within the creative industries to talk about their role and share with us their experiences of working in film and media. I'm your host, D.S. Gorman, but you can call me Darren. The Roll Call's objective is to shine a light upon some of the lesser known roles within the creative industries and give the practitioners working within the field a platform to share their knowledge with those of us just starting out in our own careers. Today, we're joined by Laura Dickson, a lecturer in film and television studies at the City of Glasgow College. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the college?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm originally from the island of Mull, on the west coast of Scotland. I've worked in television for 15 years in Glasgow and down in London, and then eventually I started lecturing 5 years ago and have been doing that ever since.
And what was it that drew you to your current role? What was it that made you think lecturing is where you wanted to be?
I never sort of started out to say I want to be a lecturer. It was just sort of, it happened really in my career that the sort of crossroads that I was at, that I was being made redundant from my television job. And when I was sort of thinking, right, I need to take a step back here, because sometimes it can come quite overwhelming in television, that I actually took a year out, and would you believe I did dog walking for a year. I actually had my own business. And then a maternity cover job came up here, and I went for it. And because I had been to this college before, I knew James Wilson, the curriculum head, and some of the staff, and did the interview, and they seemed to like me, and I was sort of current, and I got the job, and I've never looked back, really.
It must have been quite a change of pace going from dog walking to working very closely with students.
The dog walking happened because I needed a bit of time out and just to sort of work out where I was in my life and what I was doing. I was delighted to get a staff job. It was perfect. The students, yeah, I mean, obviously you're working with people in the industry, and that's a whole set of skills. But then I've never taught before. I didn't know what it was like working with young people. I mean, you would obviously have work experience students coming in. You would talk to them and explain to yourself, but they're always on their best behaviour, you know, when they come into the studios. So it was totally different then coming into being a lecturer and having to adapt to their needs, and then learning the curriculum and sort of giving them your experience and things like that. So I always say to people that even though I'm using my skills that I was taught in and I've worked in, it's like having a completely different job, because you're doing something, although you're familiar with it, it is a totally different job.
What's the transferable skill set that comes from dog walking?
Transferable skills. Well, responsibility, because I suppose if you're taking 6 or 8 dogs out, you're looking after them. And then I suppose if you're having a class of 22 students and making sure this person's done that and this person's done that. So, yeah, you get a lot more love, though, from the dogs than you do the students.
So really then it's a question of no matter what you kind of do within the industry or do within any sort of work experience, you can kind of find a way back into working within sort of film and television in some way.
We say this to the students now, it's come a lot more in the current years, that the things that are called like meta skills and life skills, they are so much more important now really than technical skills, because students have jobs in shops and bars and things like that, but they're dealing with the public. Those skills that they have, they then take into industry, and they're used to dealing with clients or other people. So, students have these skills already because we're people, that's part of your personality, and it's just how they use them. Make sure the students are aware of the skills that they have, that even though they've maybe worked in a call centre or they've maybe worked in a restaurant, they do have skills that they can bring into them. So I had skills from the sector, not just technical skills, But I had skills as I was a studio director. I already had the sort of vocabulary and the way of conducting myself that when I then had to stand in front of a class, I was very used to sort of, okay, I was speaking on a microphone and talk back, but I was very used to speaking to a large group of people, giving them directions and telling them what to do. And in a way, I've sort of then transferred those skills to then lecturing. So I think my colleagues would agree I'm quite organised. I'm sort of very proactive, and I can spin a lot of plates. And I think that is from being a director, that as a director, you're overseeing the whole production. So I know what different departments are doing at different times, especially when you're doing a live programme. And so by having those skills in a TV studio as a director, it's sort of similar to the lecturer, because you're standing at the front of the room and you're like, okay, you two need to go into this, you do, and then you're sort of got the overview. So I would say the skills, the sort of personal meta skills that I've taken from the industry into this job that I've got now.
And from having sort of studied this same sort of course in your sort of own experience, do you find yourself able to identify where certain students might be sort of feeling a little overwhelmed and where they might need that extra support?
In my day, I'm so old. It was a HND, television operations and production, but I did the exact same type of things that I teach now, because at the end of the day, it's all about the basics, and you grow. I had such a passion for television. I loved watching television, and I still do. Like, my life revolves around Strictly on a Saturday night. It revolves around the soaps. And it can get a bit frustrating for me when I have students in class that say they don't watch television, or oh, I'm more into film or something, because to me, I was so passionate about television and the course that I was doing that I was like, I want to give 110% to this, because I want to work in television. I love television. I can go through all the genres and tell you programs that I watch and things like that. So I love when I get a wee student that tells me they watch Emmerdale, or they like this or they like that, because I'm like, oh, I've watched that too, isn't that brilliant? And if I can see people trying and they get passionate about what they make, it sort of makes my job easier, because you sort of know if somebody's got it or not. Like the basics in filming, camera skills, framing of shots, how you take a photograph and things like that. I mean, I still to this day, when I take a photograph, will do it in the rule of thirds, or I'll, make sure there's nothing in the background and things like that, because my brain is sort of trained now in that way. So when I see maybe a student doing that, I'm like, oh, they've got it, this is going to be an easy transition. But I totally get that students get really overwhelmed with certain things, because they think when they come on a television course, it's going to be all glitz and glamour and working in television. I don't think they realise how technical it is, the technical setup of the live bands that come into the shows, how the cameras all got put together and things like that, because they use robotics. So I totally get it's overwhelming for students, but I think if you are able to break it down into smaller chunks, and you do have the passion for television, and as I always say to students, your homework is to watch television. That's the easiest homework that we're going to give you. Study television, just watch it. That's all you have to do. It would make it so much easier.
I think it's a wonderful sort of answer to that question, because I found when I was studying literature a little while ago, one of the things that we had to do a lot was read. And I think it's really important to immerse yourself in the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
When you're watching television, you say you still have quite a passion for being sort of a viewer of television. Do you find yourself being able to kind of switch off and actually just enjoy it, or do you find yourself sort of thinking about the technical?
No, I am absolutely able to switch off and enjoy it, because if I get to a drama, I know that there's a new series of Shetland coming on next week. Get so excited. And like my colleagues as well, I mean, they'll all tell you, see at lunchtime, when all the students go away, we're so dull. We sit together eating our lunch, and somebody will say, did you see that thing on telly? And we'll literally spend the whole hour talking about television programmes that we've watched. Summer holidays, winter, it doesn't matter. We'll always go, oh, you need to watch this, you need to watch that. So don't get me wrong, the only time I sort of switch my hat back on is when something goes wrong. I remember one day I was watching an episode of EastEnders and the character of Roxy was running along a train platform and you could see her radio mic pack on the back. And I was so excited because I thought EastEnders is, like, I can see it. I can see the mic pack, and I took a picture, I put it on Facebook, and I was like, my God, da-da-da. Or if, you cut to a camera on a live news programme and the presenter's looking the wrong way or something like that. If there's a flash of a clock up or a bit of black, those bits excite me because it's like I know the feeling that people have got because it's like the adrenaline rush of, because that split of black or whatever feels like a minute, even though it's probably only been a second or two. So I absolutely enjoy programmes. There's nothing better than my Saturday night watching Strictly. But I still like when things maybe go wrong and I'll quickly switch.
It's like that glimpse behind the curtain, isn't
Yeah.
it? Coming back a bit more to sort of kind of talking about student experience, one of the things that I think a lot of students feel is that, especially nowadays, we can almost have to be sort of like the jack of all trades. We have to be sort of freelancers and also very subject specific. And sometimes some of us come in with a really good understanding of the little bits that we know, but then it's also sort of that kind of where that overwhelming experience comes in, is where sometimes we have to do lots of things that we might not have done before. You had mentioned already that sort of, being well grounded and well versed in the basics is really important. But how would you say sort of improving those technical skills and the basics is? What advice would you give to students looking to improve?
Don't panic. Students need to remember that when you go out into the industry after this, industry employers are not going to expect you to be experts at camera, experts at lighting, because they know you've done a general course. They want to train you in the way they work themselves. So students need to know that it's the knowledge of the basics understanding of three-point lighting, things like that. And half the job is picking up the terminology. Because then that means when you go into the industry and you're maybe overhearing a conversation and somebody talks about embedded audio or time code or things like that, you're then able to go, right, I know what that means, I roughly know what they're talking about. And, it's all about knowledge, listening, understanding, and nobody's expecting anybody to be an expert at editing or whatever it is. They just need to put things into perspective. I think that's what it is. You want to get the basics of everything, find what you enjoy, and then think, right, I'm going to pursue that. Students these days have so much more opportunities than there was like when I left college. You have now like Scottish Screen, RTS do loads of stuff. There's just much more opportunity. Whereas when I was there, I literally made some industry contacts with guest lecturers that came in, one in particular, Cliff Martin. Because he could see that I was making an effort and doing things, he got me on a few jobs, and then that's how I got into Satanta. That was really lucky for me. When I think about my class now, I might be maybe 2 or 3 people in my year are working in television. Whereas now there's much more opportunities for students, but they need to want the opportunities.
Yep. I think one of the best bits of advice for people working within the creative industries is to be bold and to be brave. And I think sometimes you have to sort of make those connections by putting yourself out there. You mentioned kind of guest lecturer, Cliff Martin, that kind of got you started. What was it that sort of drew you to wanting to work with them?
Cliff was he was a funny character. Well, at least he is. He's a funny character. He's a good laugh. I think we had the same sort of personalities. And when he came in, he could see that I was more switched on. And my personality, like, I come across maybe quite confident or something like that. And because I was from Mull, and I also, the job he wanted me to do was, they don't have it now, but it was called Scott Disc, and he wanted me to help them film their music videos. It was for the tourists. Ask your parents. Your parents will know what it is. And it would go into shops and things like that for tourists. And I loved Scottish music because I was brought up in an island. So the thought of going out on location, filming a music video with this Royal Scots Dragoon Guards was like mind-blowing. I was like, absolutely. And I was the PA, so I would take the log notes. I would stand next to the camera, take the log notes, and I would do a bit of running, and I would help the guests and just, the band or whatever like that. But by giving me that opportunity, again, just gave me more sort of skills and knowledge. The same man, Cliff, then got me into Satanta Sports for 2 weeks to cover a maternity cover job, and I was to do autocue and to help get material for transmission while this girl was off, just to see how it went. So I ended up staying at Satanta for 5 years. I worked my way up from runner, production manager / EP, floor manager, and eventually I went to director. Then I went to London. I was head of their transmission area, production manager of operations, things like that. I would have to book satellite signal. I was booking all these sort of things, and I was very much into the transmission side of things, which I hadn't, known about.
Yep.
Didn't get taught at college. So that was, again, another area that I was then learning about. I always say that I thank Cliff for giving me my opportunities, because if you can find that one person who's willing to help you, and you show enough passion for television and to want to work and want to learn, you'll get the opportunity.
I think that kind of reiterates again that importance of our contacts, our relationships with the people that we work with, beyond sort of those first sort of entry level kind of contacts that got you into working. How did you sort of build your own kind of contact list?
Very easily. It was probably a bit of a cheat, really, because Satanta Sports rented an office in STV. So, and they rented the studios of STV. So when we did our studio shows, it was STV employers, STV staff that was working VT on the cameras, things like that. So we worked with them. When I came back from London, some of my Satanta colleagues had started up a production company called M&E TV, and they made programmes for BBC Alba. Now, I'm not a Gaelic speaker. You didn't have to be. But I worked for them for a few years, and again, that was fairly simple, coming up using my skills that I had, and I enjoyed that for a bit. And again, another skill that I didn't know was when you deliver a programme to the BBC, you have to sort of fill out technical forms for all their testing that they do for epilepsy and stuff like that. So I would do all of that. And then my STV job came up. So I was all in the same building. I put my CV in, applied for the job, and I think it was a case of just going through the motion because they knew that I had done it before. The connections I've made, and I think because I was professional, friendly, I was good at communicating. I wouldn't say I'm a great talker, but I'm able to sort of get myself through and, do what I need to do. And that was how I managed to get myself round the STV circle.
Do you think you would have had more opportunities within that circle had you been a Gaelic speaker, or?
No, and then, you could have done. I mean, BBC love Gaelic speakers, so I'm sure I probably could have gone to the BBC. I actually did go for a BBC job, and I didn't get it because it was going to be getting to an internal staff member, which was fine. That's what happens. But it's good to also go through the process of an interview process, because it's like a panel in front of you. And again, they ask you, what programmes do you watch? So you have to do your research and your homework.
Yeah.
You can't just go for a job and think you're going to wing it, because, that just won't work. If you contact a company, you need to at least know what programmes they make and what they do and a bit about their talent or some of their staff. They asked me, I remember the question was, what is it you don't like about one of our programmes? And thankfully I had just seen an episode of Reporting Scotland, maybe a few nights before, where they had this side angle shot of the camera and the presenter was sitting at their desk, and you could sort of see a shelf area underneath the desk, and it was all messy with cups and wires and things like that. Now, for people that know me, they know that I don't do messy. So I said that to them. And it was funny because the director and the exec producer turned around and started laughing to each other, because I think it had been a bit of bone of contention. I think they were discussing that themselves. So they found that quite funny, because I was like, because you don't want to criticise somebody's programme. So I says, well, actually, there was a bit of mess under the desk. And I says, that freaks me out when I see things like that. So, Yeah.
I suppose it's like you said earlier, it's that sort of like being able to kind of peek behind the curtain, and although you are still able to enjoy
Yeah.
the content that's being put out, it's also kind of keeping that technical
Well,
eye
that's
open.
what they wanted to know,
Yeah.
because from a director's point of view, you've got to be able to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
So they don't just want me to be looking at the presenter, they want me to notice things that other people wouldn't, that Joe Blogs at home wouldn't notice. So in my director head, I was seeing a glass, probably a phone, some cables, and I thought that would really annoy me. So yeah, they didn't mind. They found it quite funny.
It sounds like you had a really varied but kind of busy time in that early stage of your career. Coming back to sort of lecturing a bit more generally, could you tell us a little bit about what the day in the life of a lecturer might look like?
It varies, obviously, depending on what class you have each day. But in general, I spend my days lesson planning. I schedule, like at the start of the year, my team, my colleagues and I will schedule ahead for as many months ahead as we can. You work out what projects we're doing, work out when they need to be delivered, and you sort of schedule that. So there's a big part of scheduling. Lesson plans, so like, you know, today I was making something that I knew that I needed in a few weeks for an HND class. So you're constantly looking ahead. Then you're obviously having to mark some work. So you've got to look at assessment deadlines. You're chasing up students. We have guidance classes as well. So we'll maybe be scheduling guidance talks or checking in on people and things like that. So scheduling, marking, lesson plans, teaching, and anything else that really comes along.
I imagine as part of that organising, networking is just as important. Having those sort of extra contacts that you can have collaborative projects with make the work that the students are doing more meaningful.
Yeah, it's funny really, like some students, like you'll tell them that you worked in the industry and it's like they don't believe you because they see you as their teacher. So like if I tell them a story that I did something, they're just like, all right, whatever. But if I get a visitor in that's from the industry, they're much more sort of glued to what they're saying. The important part of all of the projects we do is group work. You have to go through life working with other people. There are plenty jobs I've had where you've had to be professional. You don't like a lot of people, but at the end of the day, you've got to do it. I obviously was a female in the industry as well, and working in sport, which was particularly difficult, working with a lot of strong men. And when you get to a certain position, you've got to be able to hold your own and sort of know what you're talking about. So any opportunity that we can give to the students, we do, any work experience opportunities, and the right student who does love television, does want to work in the industry, will take the opportunity. Because obviously we do have students that want to come in and it's maybe more of a hobby for them, or they might want to, just explore it a wee bit. And at the end of the day, it's the special ones that you can sort of see blossom a bit, that's got the right mentality, that are going to get the jobs.
Yep. Actually, you touched upon a really interesting point there. You are the first female guest that we've had on the roll call, which we're very, very excited about. But could you tell us a little bit more about your early experiences, especially as a younger female working within the creative industry?
I would say in the early days in Glasgow, it wasn't too bad. But you did, because I was working in sport with a lot of guys, my personality did change. And I still say that my personality's changed. I'm a different person that I am now than I was. And being a girl, you get given the jobs that are like the paperwork jobs. You're coordinating, you're logging, you're, doing this, that. When you get to like a director level or producer or things like that, you're sort of given a bit more clout, but you're easily put down. I had to put on this persona, and I didn't really like the persona. I didn't really like who I was, but I'm going out drinking, having pints with the boys, and I'm like this and like that, and they're all talking about their wives, and it's like yeah, and you find yourself turning into a completely different person because you want to fit in, you want to be one of the boys.
Yeah.
So when I came back to Glasgow after all of that, your mind again is a wee bit mushed up, and when I went back to STV, it was better because there was a much wider sort of diversity of people. And again, times had moved on. The generational people, the old men, I suppose, had sort of moved on as well. So it's much better now. But in any job you have, lecturing, television, working in a shop, calls, whatever, there will still be misogyny. I mean, you can't get away from it.
Yep.
They don't mean it, but there are little comments that'll happen. Now, luckily, I'm the type of person that can sort of wash it off, and I'm confident enough that I can just, deal with it and then move on. But there are plenty of young students that I would worry about going into jobs. And I always try and say to the girls, you need to have more confidence in yourself. I am very low self-esteem, but I just don't show it. But in my personal life, I'm a completely different person.
Yep.
It's like you put a mask on coming into work. And I think that's been hardened into me over the years, that I now try and sort of not push on to the young girls, but I try and sort of get them a bit more confident about what they're doing. And that's why when we are doing our projects, regardless of what it is, working with different people that you wouldn't necessarily be friends with
Yep.
is a good thing, because you need to, there's so much different personalities and learning difficulties and things like that now, that it's almost that you need exposure. You have to get used to seeing this type of stuff, because if you live in a bubble and you're too scared to come out of the bubble, you're not going to get on very well.
Yep. Actually, sort of coming back to sort of lecturing, I understand you run a women in media group within the college.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started, it was Women in Television. I started it, I think it's maybe 3 years, it was before COVID, and it's now turned into Women in Media. And the purpose of it was just like that. It was, people wanted it to be sort of about learning craft skills. Well, a big part of it is learning the confidence and to get a safe space for girls to be in. Now, it wasn't just females, it was, genders, whatever they wanted to identify at. And we welcome all. And it was a chance for them to get together, be with people that were passionate about what they were doing. And it wasn't just television, we were taking in journalism students, media students, things like that. And we have our social sites. We say to the girls, you go off and make content, because, again, in college, we tell you what to make.
Yep.
This group gives you a chance to make content that you want to make. And it just means you can build your CV, you can make network content, because there might be one of the journalism students that end up running the Daily Record one day. Just to know that you went to college with that person and, oh, hey, how you doing? Gets the contacts
Yep.
going. So the group is a great way just for the girls to sort of have a safe space, to get more confidence and to create content.
And can you tell us a little bit more then about your own experience when you were kind of going through college? How do you feel your experience compares to what's available now?
I mean, I don't remember anything being available. I really don't. I just remember doing my 3 years at college and Cliff coming in at the end. We were doing studio shows and I remember editing stuff, and I just remember meeting him and having a bit of banter, and then that was it. I don't remember opportunities being given to me or groups being available that I could join. Whereas I just feel now that there are just so much more organisations that are offering out different ways of networking. That students, if they have, you've got to want it though, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You can't force students to do something. You can't say you must go to this networking event, because, they might not want to, they might want to just work or, whatever. So all that we can do is facilitate it or say that it's available, and if they take it up, they take it up.
Yep. And do you find that with that sort of progression from now HNC, HND, and moving into, I think, BA as well, do you see sort of young students progressing in that sort of gaining that confidence skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been at the college 5 years now, and I think it was last year that I've managed to see a student go from NQ all the way up to BA before they left. And it was like, God, that's me just done, that whole, their life journey with them. And you can absolutely see them growing. I mean, I remember one girl last year was going off to do a game. She was going to film it and edit highlights for this company. And she was a bit panicky about it because she had to do it herself. And so but I knew her well enough that I literally was phoning my contacts in football and saying, right, what do they need to pick up? Tell me about this. What do I need to do? And I was feeding that to her, and she was like, right, that's great. And, you know, it was great, and she got a paid job out of it. And, you know, if the student really wants to work and be there, then, you know, you go out your way to help them.
And you've been doing this, correct me if I'm wrong, for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of your former students kind of go on to do sort of big projects within film and media?
Yep. One of the students who I think I had for HNC is now working at the BBC. He did the BBC training programme. Who's now there. I mean, there's various other people that you see popping up on LinkedIn or Facebook that have got jobs and they're making their way. And it's always nice to invite them back in, because I do get like speakers for the women in media as well, or, you know, when you actually look to see what they're all doing now, or again at lunchtime with the staff, they'll say, oh, did you see so and so's now working there? And there was a boy who did HNC, and he had there was quite, his mum had passed away, and he went to journalism and things like that, and you know, it was difficult for him. He's now working at the Stirling Observer doing a sports reporter. And it was great, because he's now getting all these articles published and things like that. And okay, it wasn't television, but he still did the course and was in the media industry. And he sent me this lovely message the other day saying, if it wasn't for you helping me through that dark time in my life, I don't know where I would be. And honestly, I was nearly crying. It was because he was a lovely boy, just, it was difficult. Because you end up being so emotional with the students as well. Because they're so young and they go through everything, and you become attached.
Yeah. There must be a sort of level of vulnerability that kind of comes with sort of working with people who come from such a varied kind of background as well.
My colleagues always laugh at me that I'm like a mother hen, that I've tried to step back and not do that now, but you can't help but get involved because you're human. You know, you've got compassion. Obviously, there's rules and regulations that you can't say this and you can't do that and whatever, and you've got to pass it on to qualified people. And I totally get that. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And if you see somebody in distress, or if you see somebody that just needs a wee arm around their shoulder, then I'm going to do that.
I know, I completely get that. I mean, from my own experience, I went through something very, very similar. Experienced loss right at the beginning of my course, and I think if it hadn't been for the compassion sort of offered by the lecturing team, I wouldn't have then progressed forward. But it's the difference that sort of one lecturer can make, and all it takes is that sort of one lesson, one kind word to keep you going.
The school and college years are so important in a person's life. It really develops the character. And when you come to college, I always say to people at the start of the year, you know, this isn't school. You don't have to be here, but you've chosen to be here. So you have to meet us halfway. You know, you have to bring the effort, the creative ideas, things like that. And if I see people doing that, then I will meet them halfway, and I will also then go, right, what do we need to do? This is what, you know, to get them the best person as possible.
Obviously, we've talked about sort of like, you know, the highs and the lows of lecturing. But for you, what has been one of the sort of the biggest highlights of your career?
Well, it was at STV2. The show that I did was like a magazine show, and we had live bands, and we had loads of great acts that would come in, current ones, Kaiser Chiefs, people like that. And my highlight was actually directing a performance of Melanie C from the Spice Girls. She came in, she sang her song, she did 2 songs, and I directed her performance and all her band and things like that. And as I say, we did the Kaiser Chiefs, and there were so many, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe I've just done that.
I mean, that must have just been so exciting.
Yeah.
I would have been very, very excited. I have to come back to, I understand you worked with Lorraine Kelly as well.
I did. Lorraine, lovely Lorraine. She's so down to earth. I mean, she's exactly as you see on the telly. So at STB, they have something called the STB Children's Appeal. And in one of the years, they wanted to do a live programme from my studio. And so I got to direct this hour-and-a-half programme of the Children's Appeal. We had inputs from all over Scotland, Inverness, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and Lorraine was on the sofa. We had guests and everything like that. And I actually did it 2 or 3 times. It wasn't just once, but I directed Lorraine Kelly. And she was so nice and absolutely, she's just so professional. And she also has done a speaking event with the Women in Media Girls, because she, again, loves giving back. And she's just celebrated a big anniversary herself of, I think it was 40 years in television. And so, again, people like that. We had Edith Bowman as well. She, again, was another one that was delighted to help out.
Yep.
But yeah.
Sounds like very, very exciting to people to work with. But
Yeah.
do you have any highlights that you would say stand out from your time as a lecturer?
Probably the one that was most recent was that we did a live stream for Scottish Opera. And it was quite a big deal for our students because it was a wee bit more advanced. So I directed it, and I had the crew were all students, Vision Mixer P and things like that. And it went so well. And the buzz that they got, I just thought, that's the buzz I always felt. Because you can't get away with that. It doesn't matter how long you've worked in television. When you see your programme going out or you're doing a live programme, there is always a buzz. And I just remember the Vision Mixer, he was concentrating so much and he was wanting to be, so good. And I just turned around to him at the end and I was like, you did really well. And his face, he was just buzzing. He was so happy. He couldn't believe that he'd Vision Mixed this live stream that was going out to however many hundreds of people. And I was just delighted for him. I think that's the good bits is, you see the people, the students grow, you see what they achieve, and you're just happy for them because, that's why we're here at the end of the day.
I think, that's a really wonderful sentiment. And I really like, sort of, again, it comes back to that sort of giving students that sort of real world experience, creating something tangible that is out there in the world that you can sort of look back on. It must just be a really profound experience for some students.
Yeah, every day is different. Every student's different. It's just a feeling that you get, if you successfully get somebody through it. Because some days I'll do a class and I think, God, I was terrible. I didn't explain that properly. They didn't get it. It's my fault. But then if you see somebody that's been out with a camera and they come back and you can see it and you're like, oh my God, they've got it. This is great. You get a good feeling as well. The simplest things. Because you have a lot of self-doubt and you think, I've not done this right. I don't understand it. The students are going to know that I'm not getting it. Or they'll maybe ask you a technical question about editing that you don't know, and you have to look it up. But at the end of the day, we're all working together. That's what I always say. You're like one big team, you're one big crew, and we're all there to help each other. I always say that peer support is vital as well, and that's another reason we get students working in groups. That if, you might not learn well from my techniques, but if you're out filming with another crew member who's a bit more confident and you see what they're doing, you learn from them, you learn from everybody around you. So it's all about approaches to learning as well. So, you get the lecturer, you get the tutorial video, you'll get written instructions, or you'll get, your peer learning. So whatever works for you is fine with me.
I like that. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in entering this industry, whether that be a student or someone who is going into it as a freelancer?
The first thing I would say is make sure this is the right topic for you. Don't think for a second that you're coming into television and it's all going to be glitz and glamour, because it's not. It's long hours, working hard. There's a lot of tough people. If you really want to do this job and you want to work in the industry, know about what you're doing then. If you're a freelancer or whatever and you're approaching people for jobs, do your homework. Find out what companies are in your area, what are they making, things like that. You don't have to be an expert. Nobody's expecting you to be that. But if you can be professional, friendly, the way you just hold yourself, be polite. It's just the simple things. Show initiative, ask questions, things like that. It'll really stand you in good stead, but you have to be passionate about it.
Yep.
There's plenty of people that I'll say, did you watch the news? You have, it's sort of, I get really annoyed about it, and, you don't mean to be, but, watch the news, watch a quiz show, watch a drama, watch a documentary, watch different genres of programme because it's so different. I ended up being sort of stuck in sport. I never wanted to work in sport. I wanted to work on the big Strickleys and things like that. I loved studio programmes. But because in that time in Glasgow, it was just the way there wasn't much work. It was sport I got stuck in. So trying to get out of sport into something else was really difficult for me. I got to such a level with sport that if I was to jump to something else, I would have had to go down the ladder again. And I just couldn't afford to do that. So you really have to sort of know what area you want to get in as well and just run with the opportunities.
Yep. Do you think personal biases in terms of sort of genre, in terms of the things that the media we consume, can that limit potential opportunity?
I think nowadays for young people, absolutely, because they're stuck with their head on their phones and they don't watch television the way I do. Again, my colleagues, I'm still a linear viewer. I watch television, 6 o'clock news, soaps at 7 till maybe 8:30, 9, drama at 9 o'clock, news headlines at 10. Then I would maybe go to Netflix or Disney Plus or something like that. When I was younger, I only had 5 channels on my television.
Yep.
And being from Mull, I was one of the first households in my village to get Sky Television. I mean, I remember all of that.
I do too. I remember when Channel 5 got turned on for the first time.
There you go. And so young people nowadays, it's like they've got so much content. They've got their phones, they've got social media, they've got platforms. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I try not to oversubscribe because the amount of money, again, that you pay for all of these things. So I feel sorry for young people because they are so overwhelmed with the amount of content available that I don't think anybody can pick a genre of programme that they probably like. Whereas I, being the linear old school viewer, I know exactly what I like. So I would say streaming obviously has its benefits, but for young people, again, it's like everything's fast moving. You know, they want everything now on their phone, they want it on demand, and they want it now. Nobody has patience to wait for anything.
Yeah.
So, again, my colleagues laugh at me that, you know, I just, there was a drama series that I was watching and they were like, oh, you know, all episodes are available. And I was like, no. I'm going to wait for next week to watch the episode because I don't want it to end. I enjoy watching this programme so much that if I watch everything now, what am I going to do for the next 6 weeks?
Yeah. No, I completely get that. And on that note, to switch to sort of just to kind of tie up what we were talking about earlier, can you tell us a little bit about what qualifications, skills brought you into lecturing? What did you need to know to kind of get into lecturing?
It was just my life experience, my work. I obviously did my HND. I didn't have a degree. Back then, I didn't anyway. I had 15 years experience of working in the industry. At the end of that, I got my job here and I did a degree on my own from Open University. And then I got my teaching qualification through the college. So being a lecturer, it's not all about the sort of bit of paper that your degree's written on. It's about the skills that you've got from the industry that you're trying to teach. It's a strange job because you come in with the experience, you learn the curriculum of what you're supposed to teach, and then you go, all right, okay, I can do that. And then you do it in your own way that you know how to do. I mean, every lecturer's different. That's again another thing that my colleague might teach camera different to the way I teach camera because it's just the way we operated in our jobs.
Yeah. And if someone wanted to sort of enter sort of lecturing as a career, what first steps might they need to take?
I would say if you're going to come into lecturing, absolutely, it's great. But do your life experience first and get the skills in the area you want to work in because, you know, you need to be able to know what you're talking about to be able to teach it.
Yeah.
But eventually, like myself and my colleagues, we've been out of the industry now. I think the last thing I did was a live election for STV a few years back. So that was like the last thing I did. But eventually, I'll become redundant in terms of not my knowledge, because I'll still have basic knowledge. But because you've been out of the industry for a while, you'll then forget a wee few things, and technology moves on. So you've got to constantly, you know, I still have to reteach myself. Like every time Adobe releases a new version of Premiere Pro, I still have to then learn how to do it. So you never stop learning.
Yep. I think that's a really important lesson is, you know, it's an ongoing journey. There's no sort of one kind of stepping stone that you can rest on.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of keep going. On that note, that is unfortunately all that we have time for in this week's episode. But Laura, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights and experience. And thank you to our listeners, both new and those of you who returned. If you aren't already following us, please check out our Instagram at the Roll Call Podcast to keep up to date with our upcoming episodes and to submit questions about the industry for our future guest to answer. Until next time.
Okay, that's a wrap.